Hi, and welcome to Conversations with B'nai B'rith International. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Thanks for spending some time with us today. If you enjoy our conversation series, make sure you never miss an interview by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel and liking us on Facebook. And of course, be sure to visit our website, b'naibrith.org, to learn more about our humanitarian and advocacy efforts across the globe. Well, after 27 seasons of working in Major League Baseball, Josh Rawitch has taken on a new challenge, president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. With such a rich past and present, the Hall of Fame has the unique responsibility of sharing the best of America's pastime, while also updating its collection and its narrative in real time as records are broken, no-hitters are thrown, and championships are won. That's why we're fortunate to have Josh with us to talk about leading an iconic American institution. We'll also delve into the role Judaism has played in his life and his career and his experiences in professional baseball with the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks, and more. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think that every American who has played baseball at some point says, gee, maybe I can make it to the Hall of Fame. But of course, most can't. So maybe they probably say, thinking about it, the next best thing would be to be the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame. So you're really in a great spot. So let's start with what led you to the opportunity to become the president of the Hall of Fame. What appealed to you most about this role? And in a more general sense, what's your vision for the Hall going forward?
Well, it's interesting when you work at the team side of things, as I did for, as you mentioned, more than a quarter century. It's strange. You always tend to think about other teams as potential destinations. And I certainly never thought I was going to leave the Dodgers. I figured I'd be there my whole career. And this unbelievable opportunity came at the Diamondbacks and had no intention of leaving the Diamondbacks. And I got a call from my predecessor, Jeff Idelson, who was the president here for a little more than a decade, but also had worked at the Hall for 25 years in other positions. And he said, hey, would you ever think about taking my role? I knew he was leaving, and he said, would you ever be interested in interviewing for this? I kind of think you're one of a handful of people I've identified as a possible successor. And like you said, I mean, there's nothing that can prepare you for a call like that, or ultimately the call where the chairman, Jane Forbes Clark, called and said, we actually want to make you the next president of the Hall of Fame. It just doesn't compute for a light-hitting infielder who really has no business sitting on the stage with those people, or even sometimes sitting in this office. I find myself every day kind of floored that I live in Cooperstown and that I get to work in this place and with these people. So it's an unbelievable honor, and I take it very, very seriously. I feel very, very lucky and humbled to be in this role. And to your question of what we're going to try to do, I mean, in a lot of ways, this first 6-8 months has been about understanding what's gone on. I really think that's important, that I not come in here with all these visions and things that I knew I was going to do out the gate. But a lot of what we talked about during the interview process was just staying relevant and making sure that everything we do makes this place as relevant to my son and my daughter as it was to my parents and my grandparents. And I think if you came here in 1942, you'd probably be pretty amazed at what this place has become. And I hope that 50, 60, 70 years from now, people are saying the same thing, that this Hall of Fame is an absolute mecca for baseball history, for baseball fans, and that it's a must visit for anybody that loves the game.
Well, baseball is so much about tradition, and the Hall is about tradition. And so I'm going to move to a related topic, which is the role that Judaism has played in your career, because you've made some comparisons about traditions, which of course the Jewish people, history of the Jewish people is all about. So tell us more about those traditions and how that was woven into your life.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, for me, my religion has always been about the traditions in our family. I grew up interested. My mom was part of B'nai B'rith Women. My father was, I think, the president of his AZA chapter, and my niece is very involved in B'nai B'rith girls in the Bay Area. So that even just the tradition of those sorts of things, I've always felt is a really cool part of maintaining our family's history. And kind of one of the things we try to do here at the Hall of Fame is connect generations. We have a kind of 3-part motto that's preserving history, honoring excellence, and connecting generations. And that's, I think, in a lot of ways, what religion and what Judaism has been for me, is a connection to my past, to my my grandparents, my great grandparents, and everybody that came over from Europe. Baseball does that both in this building. Certainly, we walk around every day and we watch kids with their grandparents or kids with their parents taking this place in and talking about, well, I remember this game, and the kid remembers this game, and all the amazing things that happen when you do that. But the sport itself, so you come into a ballpark and it kind of has this feeling that, we have a film here that we show to people that visit, and the only way you can see it is coming to the Hall of Fame. But it's this unbelievable 17-minute movie that puts me in tears every time I look at it. And there's a line in there where someone says, baseball is the only sport where you have a connection to someone that you've never met. You really feel like you know Babe Ruth or Henry Aaron or any of the greats that came before us. And I think in a lot of ways, I guess that I feel very connected still to my ancestors, even those that I never met. And I guess that's probably how I'd say they tie together.
Well, as far as our baseball ancestors, I think there are two Jews enshrined in the plaque gallery. One is Hank Greenberg and one is Sandy Koufax. But there are some ball players out there today, Alex Bregman and Jock Peterson and Max Fried, who are long-standing members of our community. Tell us a little about Max Fried, because I know you have a connection to him.
So I will do that. But the first thing I want to do is also just point out there are actually 3 more plaques in the gallery that I had to learn about really when I got here. Bud Selig being one of them, Marvin Miller, the former head of the union, and one that I didn't even know until literally last week. I was doing a Zoom, and so I referred to the 4 plaques, and they said, there's a 5th, Barney Dreyfuss, the owner of the Pirates way back in the day. So there are, in fact, 5 Jews who have plaques on the walls. And very recently, somebody told me they were going to do some research. They thought maybe one of the umpires might have possibly been Jewish. So you are correct that there are 2 players enshrined, but 5 total enshrinees. And just to your question about Max Fried, it really is a tie back to my high school teammate, a gentleman by the name of Matt LaCour, became the head coach at Harvard Westlake, and he was the coach of actually 3 guys in the big leagues: Max Fried, Jack Flaherty, and Lucas Giolito. All played together in high school. They were all pitchers in the same staff, and Max. Actually, in a very cool way, Max got to be part of the first ever matchup between 2 Jewish players at the World Series when he faced Alex Bregman earlier this year. And I think that happened early in the series, but late in the series, he pitched the last game when the Braves won it all. And I was down on the field post game, and that's kind of how I introduced myself to him was, hey, you wouldn't have any reason to know me, but I actually am friends with Matt LaCour from back in the day. And it kind of immediately set him at ease. And I referenced the fact, by the way, there was another gentleman who was there who knows us both. And he said, Andy's a member of the tribe. And so very quickly after this guy celebrating his World Series championship, we're standing on the field talking about these random Jewish geography from the San Fernando Valley. And I asked him if he would donate his cleats from that game that night. And he was kind enough to do so, which is part of one of the things we do when we travel to events like that is we try to secure artifacts for the rest of time that can be part of our collection. So yeah, he's him, Bregman, then Jock Peterson walked past us a little bit later in the clubhouse, and I jokingly asked him for his pearls, thinking he wasn't going to give them up. And he actually he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "I'm serious if you're serious." And he walked a few steps further, called his jeweler, and he said, "My jeweler said he'll give me another pair if I want to give you these." And I said, "Perfect. We'll take the real ones that were on your neck when you played, and you can keep another pair." So, there's all sorts of really cool connections throughout the game with Jewish people and Jewish players.
Well, how has the transition been from working for a team? You were with the Diamondbacks for 10 years, you were with the Dodgers, to leading an institution, a museum that celebrates the history of America's national pastime. And also, let me ask, how is it for a California guy like you to be adapting to central New York, which can get pretty cold at times?
I have gotten that question a few times. So in terms of the weather, certainly probably the biggest change for us. And we were in Arizona for the last decade, in addition to my time in Southern California. My wife is from Long Island, so she had a little bit of an idea of what we were getting into, but it definitely gets colder up here than it does downstate. And I think the best way to describe that is I feel like I built it up to be so bad in my mind that it really wasn't that bad. I mean, we really kind of, in the same ways that in Arizona, you kind of go from your air-conditioned office to your air-conditioned car to your air-conditioned house. You just don't spend a lot of time standing around in 115-degree heat. Here, you just don't spend a lot of time standing around in the cold. And so we've adapted to it fine. My family has actually really settled in well here, and we're enjoying ourselves. So in terms of the actual adapting from the team life to the museum life, I'd say that's the biggest difference is that we're a nonprofit. I don't think most people realize that. People think that we're run by Major League Baseball or that we somehow get funded by MLB. We don't. We go out and get donations. And so the world of development is new to me. The fact that we don't have games every single night and we're not constantly there's no winning streak that can lift the spirits of the staff, and there's no losing streak that can deflate people. There's just the reality of day-to-day life in a nonprofit and in a museum. And so I think there's been so many things that are different, but there's also a lot of things that are the same. We do merchandise, we do sponsorship, we do ticketing and marketing, and a lot of the things that we do at the team side of things. And so I've just tried to kind of do a lot of listening to the side of the nonprofit that I don't know about, which is I've never run a museum or a library or understood how to handle artifacts and documents. And those are the sorts of things where I really feel like every day I'm learning something new. And it's crazy to walk into our collections area and see the unbelievable things that are part of our collection. And I can do that every day. And I do make it a point every day to walk into the museum and take in some other piece of history that I haven't yet seen.
Well, I know that you're asked this question every time, so I'm going to ask the question too. What is your favorite artifact so far?
Man, they're really there's so many different ways to answer it. I mean, I did recently I recently stumbled upon a pair of Steve Sax's cleats, who was my favorite player growing up, and so that's crazy to me. He's actually coming out here in a couple of weeks to be part of our classic weekend that we do over Memorial Day. And even though I had worked with him a little bit at the Dodgers and I had him as a coach at the Diamondbacks, the idea that these shoes that he probably wore at a game I was at as a kid, I think are really pretty neat. But that's obviously more modern. The things that are in this collection that date back to the earliest known baseball uniform from Baraboo, Wisconsin, is kind of boggles my mind every time I look at it. Or we have a chest protector from basically before the days that they were padded. It was actually it's got a little valve on the side of it, and a catcher would put a straw and blow up the chest protector so that he had some protection from balls hitting him. I mean, there are so many cool things, artifacts from Babe Ruth or Henry Aaron or Lou Gehrig or Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige. I literally every day come across one, so it is very, very hard to pick a favorite.
Well, you've talked about the separation between MLB and the Hall of Fame, but is there a connection in terms of the artifacts? In other words, history is being made every day somewhere. It's a tape measure home run, or there's some you mentioned Freed and Bregman, and what do you take from that? So, do you have an arrangement with MLB whereby the ball that's hit, the X number home run, or the 1,000th hit, or the 3,000th hit, to make sure that you're in on those particular items?
So what we do, it's a great question. A lot of people actually kind of wonder how that happens. It's not an arrangement with MLB. We go directly to each of the 30 teams because, again, since we're not an MLB entity, and they're incredibly supportive of us in a lot of different ways, but we work directly with each team. So if there's something in advance that we know that's going to happen, take, for example, Dusty Baker's 2000th win that just happened, or Miguel Cabrera's 3000th hit, we'll reach out in advance and we'll talk to the team and we'll say, hey, would you mind talking with Miguel or Dusty and seeing whether they'd be willing to donate something to us when it happens. And so the conversation tends to happen in advance. And often they'll say, okay, let me think about this. And what we try to do is find an artifact that actually helps tell the story of the event. So for an event like Miguel Cabrera's hit, we don't want his first baseman's mitt or a batting glove. We might ask for a bat or a jersey or a helmet. We do have his helmet from when he hit his 500th home run, which was part of last year. But then there's also things like no hitters that happen where you don't know it's coming, and so we're constantly paying attention. At night, we have a gentleman here in the office who really is the main person that reaches out after something historic happens. Last week, the Angels threw a no hitter, and before I was asleep. It was 12:30 in the morning here, but this guy is, God bless him, he's up till all hours of the night making sure nothing crazy happens. And I woke up to a message saying the ask is already in to the Angels to see if we could get a cap from the no hitter, because caps tend to be the thing that we ask for when it's a no-hitter. We have an incredible collection of caps from no-hitters. So it really kind of depends, but there's nothing that requires people to give. We don't pay for anything. They are donated items, and the player knows that when they donate it, we're going to preserve this for the rest of the time. And that's a very long time to tell someone you're looking after it. So we have to make sure that we're properly funded to do so.
Well, it's immortality, really is what it is.
Yeah,
It's baseball immortality. Just
yeah,
one word about Cooperstown, leaving the weather aside for a second. We're all envious because it is such an iconic town. It's right out of Currier and Ives, and it's just a magnificent place to visit. So you've got really a great place where the hall is located, probably a great place to live. And in terms of a destination, there's no question that I know that we went up to visit. You also visit the neighborhood. You visit the surrounding towns and the rest of that part of New York State. So it's really great.
yeah. And I
Um,
should add to that just because you brought it up. I mean, I think most people don't realize how much more is here than just the Hall of Fame. Unbelievable golf course that sits right on the lake, and it really does that. The town, in a lot of ways, my wife and I joked shortly after we got here. It feels like a movie set. You're walking on Main Street, and like you can't believe that a place like this still exists in America. And she had said, I feel like we live on a movie set. And I said, I keep waiting for the director to go, cut, scene's over, everybody go back to Arizona. And it's like, no, this is our home, and we live 2 blocks from the hall. And I really do hope people make it a point to come visit, because we talk to people who say it's on my bucket list. I got to get there. And it's like, get this thing off your bucket list and put it on your to-do list. Get out here and come check it out.
yeah, I mean, you have Field of Dreams, but then you have the real Field of Dreams, which is Cooperstown.
Absolutely.
Uh, Technically, the 2022 induction weekend will be your first as president because your predecessor stepped down just after last year's. But you still attended and began your career then with the Hall. My question, as an unabashed Yankee fan, is what was last year's induction ceremony like with Derek Jeter entering Cooperstown, among others?
Oh man, it was so cool, and it truly the way I've tried to describe it feels like your baseball card collection has come to life around you. I mean, all these unbelievable players that are walking onto the stage, and as I'm greeting them and they're sitting down around me, it just doesn't make any sense that I would be sitting on a stage with these people. And for the Yankee fans, I know the unfortunate thing was there was a lot of talk that we might break the all-time record from when Wynn and Ripken were inducted to have 70, 80,000 people, but obviously it didn't happen because of COVID in 2020, and then we wound up moving it to September in 2021, which probably kind of impacted attendance as well. It was the only time we could really get the surrounding facilities that we needed. So it was incredible, I'm sure, from any fan standpoint who made it, and from Derek's standpoint. It probably would have been even bigger and grander had we not dealt with what we were dealing with. But actually, I'll tell you a funny story that just happened a couple of days ago. Our chairman, Jane Forbes Clark, hosts a party the Friday night before every Hall of Fame weekend for all the VIPs here. And this year was much smaller because we were being very careful not to spread COVID in any way. And Bernie Williams actually performed. He and his band were actually the jazz group the Latin jazz group that played. And so just 2 days ago, Jim Cott was in town, another former Yankee, was in town for his orientation where we walked them through what's going to happen in July. We're sitting at breakfast with Jane and myself and Jim and his wife, and Bernie Williams walks into the hotel at breakfast. And I'm like, what are you doing in Cooperstown? It turned out he had a meeting about an hour away. And he said, I love this place. I love the town. I love this hotel. I wanted to come, even though we're going to drive an hour to this meeting, I figured I'd stay at the Otesaga. And I said, you realize where we're standing right now is where the stage was for your last time you were standing right here, you were on stage performing to all these Hall of Famers. And he looked around, he's like, this doesn't even look like the same room. I said, well, we had changed the look of it. But so yeah, a lot of Yankees coming through this place on a regular basis. And Bernie, Jim Cott, just a few of them in the last 48 hours.
That's great. I think Jim Cott has a new book out, actually,
He does.
which is on my to read list.
Yeah.
So, what other events does the Hall host each year? And are you looking forward to expanding programs, exhibits? And in the age of the internet, what's the future of the Hall online?
Yeah, those are awesome questions. So our main two events every year is Hall of Fame Classic Weekend, which always happens over Memorial Day weekend, and we bring in a player from all 30 teams that comes in. I'd say about half of them are former All-Stars, half of them are established big leaguers who come in and they play an exhibition game for 7 innings on Doubleday Field down the street. And then we have all sorts of cool events surrounding it. So that's actually coming up in about 2 weeks. Tickets still available if anybody is in the general vicinity. You may not be booking a trip to Cooperstown at this point for 2 weeks from now, but So that's our second biggest event, Induction Weekend, which this year is July 22nd through the 24th. Got 7 inductees, really great players from across, literally going back to the earliest Black professional baseball player, Bud Fowler, all the way up to Big Papi, David Ortiz. So you've got that. Always happens at the end of July. And we do a lot of actual other smaller events that when you check our website and you see throughout the year, it might be we actually have an umpire, Dale Scott, who's going to be here on Tuesday of next week doing a talk in our theater, who's going to be just talking about his life as an umpire. He's the first openly gay umpire. He's going to be doing something here that will be both live and also online for those that get in. And so in terms of what we're doing online, I mean, you just nailed it. We just announced our next major initiative. It's going to be focused on Black baseball. We announced it on the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. And it actually we have an exhibit right now called Ideals and Injustices that opened on the 50th anniversary of Jackie. So it was a 25-year-old exhibit. And we're actually in the process right now of a 2-year undertaking of everything from an actual in-person exhibit in Cooperstown to educational portals online, probably a new website, all sorts of social media elements. So one of the things we really have to do is figure out how to also bring this incredible place out to those who can't get to Cooperstown. And so you'll start seeing all sorts of things, whether it's a brand new website we're going to launch by the end of this year, early next year. Lots of really cool things coming. And the best way to stay on top of it is follow us on social media or just check out our website.
Let's talk about the induction ceremony for a second. I mean, it's so meaningful. You know, the first baseball that I had signed by a player was right here in Washington. A colleague of mine and I went up to the office of Jim Bunning. Jim Bunning served in the Senate from Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And we had gone up to see him on an issue totally unrelated to baseball.
Right.
But his office was decorated with these terrific posters about baseball. And then, of course, you know, we brought a couple of baseballs with us. We had to.
Of course.
And he signed the baseballs. But that HOF on the signature is really it represents such an accomplishment. Talk about to you what that means in terms of honoring these figures who not only played such a great role in the game, but also meant so much to so many fans, millions of fans in this country.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think really hits these guys when they walk into the plaque gallery. I mean, it's so many people think of the Hall of Fame as just the plaque gallery, but there's the 3-story museum with all these amazing things. You get all this great history walking through that, and we usually ask people to start there and finish up in the plaque gallery because there's only been 340 who have ever been enshrined. When we get through July, there'll be 7 this year that'll make it 340. 339 men, 1 woman who has got a plaque in the gallery, and to be able to, as you said, write HOF on the baseballs you sign. You watched in the last 10 days. I've watched Jim Cott and David Ortiz walk into the plaque gallery, and it hits them in a way that they really can't believe that they're there. And it not just standing there, but they're going to have a plaque on that wall. You see it hit them. And for some of these people have done so many incredible things in their life, and for them to basically be immortalized, so that we were talking to Jim Cott about his great grandkids coming out and someday seeing this long after he's gone. And it means a great deal to them. It means obviously quite a bit to fans. We saw all sorts of, actually, there's a great example of what it means to fans. When David Ortiz was here, there was a group of kids, high school kids, who were in town to play in a tournament right down the street at Doubleday Field. Well, it got rained out. And so they basically just followed him around the museum. And you could just feel their joy. These are 16, 17-year-old kids that they couldn't believe they were getting to take a selfie with Big Papi. And it doesn't matter who the Hall of Famer is when you say to somebody, hey, this is so-and-so, and you might be a 6-year-old kid, but this guy finished playing in the 60s. It just has this unbelievable feeling to it that connects you to the past.
As a former front office guy, I want to talk about analytics for a moment, pardon me, and how that would affect the hall in terms of its recognition of players going forward. They become a critical way for front offices in baseball to evaluate players. It's completely changed the game. For example, when evaluating players, teams have put less emphasis on hitters' average number of strikeouts, dive deeper into statistics like exit velocity, launch angle. Last year in the American MVP race, only one player finished with a 300 or above batting average among the top 20 vote getters. Although I go back to the days of Carl Yastrzemski,
Yeah,
I think
301.
He won 301. I remember feeling, what's the future at that point? What's the future of baseball if everybody else is under 300?
Yeah.
But well, that's a bit of an anomaly. Batting averages across the game, of course, are down for a variety of reasons. So, given how front offices change their approach to statistics, how can the baseball community compare players from different eras? And do you think analytics have changed the criteria that players must meet to eventually enter Cooperstown?
Yeah, great questions. I think it actually already has changed in some ways. That one misnomer maybe is that I should say misperception is that people think that when the Veterans Committee, or what we now call the Era Committee, gets together in a room, they're generally not comparing across eras. They're not saying, well, this person had the names on the ballot are not getting compared to each other. The comparison is whether this person stood out during his own era as a Hall of Famer. And so I'll give you an example where analytics already has played a huge role in the perception of Ted Simmons, who got elected last year. He got very small number of the vote from the baseball writers when he was eligible years ago. And as people started looking and saying, wow, on base percentage is way more valuable than we realized, and what he did behind the plate was way more valuable than we realized, suddenly his name started coming up as, maybe this guy could get elected as a Hall of Famer. And sure enough, he did. And so I think the way that people look at the game has changed from that perspective. But then when you count some of the counting statistics, there's no doubt that not just analytics, but the way the game has changed. Pitchers aren't getting as many wins in a season. You're not going to see anybody probably win 300 games for a long time. And really what it's going to be up to is the baseball writers who are looking and saying, okay, well, Clayton Kershaw is probably not going to win 300 games. Well, a lot of people would tell you Clayton Kershaw is a Hall of Famer and may very well get elected by the baseball writers on a first ballot. I think that it's probably, to me, less about analytics changing the game and more about the writers are going to have to look and say, who are the absolute 1% best players who played during the 2010s? And that group is still going to continue to get elected. I feel very confident that will happen. But it is very hard to get in. We are only truly 1% really of those who have ever played the game wind up with a plaque on the wall. And so I do think analytics will play a role in the way people determine that in the future.
Well, it's an interesting way of looking at it, because for someone like me, I mean, going way back to when I started to be a fan, probably at the age of 9 or 10, and I'm constantly making reference to Warren Spahn, for example. Now, Warren Spahn won 363 games, an immense amount of shutouts, an immense amount of complete games, and I often wonder, and he pitched well into his 40s, and I wondered how did that arm stand up through all of that. But you're right that today is totally different. Conditioning is different, and not only analytics, but simply the way we look at players and their health and their injuries, if they have to. How is that treated? So I think the idea of saying, yes, that best 1% during that particular period is probably the best way to go. A couple more questions.
Sure.
In 2019, Mariano Rivera received 100% of the vote and was elected to the Hall unanimously, becoming the first player to enter Cooperstown with that distinction. Well deserved, I might add. Now, we often hear upon consideration for the Hall that a player should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. A lot of emphasis is placed on that. Do you think being voted in unanimously or as a first ballot Hall of Famer is important, or is it as important as sports writers and the sports world would make us believe? I mean, do these things have an impact on a Hall of Famer's place in history, or is it just getting that percentage to get in? That's the recognition that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking some really great questions, because I personally don't think, I mean, it's a wonderful distinction for Mariano, and it's a great story, and I think it certainly helps the conversation over all of December and January. Is David Ortiz going to be a first ballot guy? But at the end of the day, as you walk through the plaque gallery, it doesn't delineate in any way whether you were a first ballot or whether you got in like Gil Hodges or Ted Simmons or Jim Cott after many opportunities to get in. I personally don't think it actually matters whether you were first ballot or whether you were a unanimous vote getter. I think it's ultimately an honor of once somebody has decided, whether it's an era committee, 75% of that group or 75% of the writers, it's just an incredible honor to have a plaque on that wall. And I think they recognize it. And I'm sure that some of them would say, it would have been nice if I didn't have to wait 4 years, or I'm sure it would have been nice if I didn't have to wait 50 years after my dad's passing, which is the case with Gil Hodges. But we just had his family here too. And they're no less thrilled right now that it has finally happened for their father than they would have been maybe 30, 40 years ago.
Well, speaking of award winners, we touched on this earlier, but I want to come back to it to close out. You're a public relations professional, and you won the 2018 Robert O. Fischel Award for Public Relations Excellence, given annually to an industry executive who excels in promoting the game. What do you think is the best way to make the Hall of Fame more accessible, both intellectually, physically, and we've talked about online exhibits and so forth, and what do you think is the next big step for the Hall as you look forward?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's a great topic to cover because I could literally talk about it for the next 2 hours. There's so many plans that we've started talking about, some of which I touched on from the new exhibits or online opportunities. But I do think one particular area of potential growth is international. There's all sorts of ways that the game right now is starting to grow internationally. And I just looked yesterday. I saw the NBA for the first time has had, I think, 4 MVPs in a row come from overseas. And we have at the moment about 30% of baseball players are from somewhere outside of the U.S. But I do think that there's immense potential to help make Cooperstown not only accessible to other Americans and people who can't travel, finding ways to do traveling exhibits. We've done some great ones in the past, and we've got some ideas for future ones. But really, I mean, you think about we're not far off from when Ichiro will be eligible to potentially be enshrined in the Hall of Fame, would be the first Japanese-born player. You've got David Ortiz going in the Dominican. You've got MLB just announcing games in Paris and London and Puerto Rico and down in the Dominican. There's so much opportunity. This world has become, as people say, so flat over the last 15, 20 years that we can reach a baseball fan in New Zealand, where I've got a good friend who ran baseball in New Zealand. We can reach baseball fans there and help bring Cooperstown to them and convince them to come when they come to the United States to come check out Cooperstown. And that's really a lot of ways what my job is to just keep raising the profile of this amazing place, get people to want to visit, give them a reason to visit, and then ultimately deliver when they get here on making it something that they will remember forever and go back to wherever they came from and tell everybody, you got to go see this place. It's that special.
Well, that's great. Josh, thank you for being with us and talking all things Hall of Fame. Lots of luck to you going forward in your new position. It's been wonderful speaking with you today.
Thanks so much for having me, and good luck. Hopefully we see some of the people watching this out our way soon.
Well, our thanks to Baseball Hall of Fame President Josh Rawitch for joining us and sharing his experiences in Cooperstown and Judaism's impact on his career. Thank you, too, for tuning in to this conversation with B'nai B'rith. If you enjoyed this interview, make sure you catch all of our programs by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel and liking us on Facebook. And be sure to visit our website, bnaibrith.org, to learn more about our important work, including our efforts on the ground supporting Ukrainian refugees in Poland, Moldova, and Romania, as well as those still within Ukraine's borders. For my guest, Josh Rawitch, and for B'nai B'rith, I'm Dan Mariaschin. Join us again soon.